At this particular time, we are going to have a public meeting will be held as follows on February 1st, 2020, pertaining to the redistricting. Call for public once. Call.
Public meeting call for those who might want to speak?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. My name is Wayne Thibodeau. I reside at 2603 West Main Street in Gray, Louisiana. And board members and Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the opportunity to weigh in on this. I did see the map and I didn't pay close attention to it, but I have spoken with Mr. Boulanger and I did visit his office and did have a chance to look at the statistics and what's being proposed. And my reason for speaking is related to District 1 and District 2, which I believe are designated majority-minority district. Both the majority in both districts, in my opinion, should be strengthened. I believe in the 2010 census, the deviation was nearly 10% for 1 and 2. And I believe this new proposal, in one of the districts, the deviation is probably a little less than 2%. And then I believe in one, it's a little around 6% or a little more than that. So I would simply want to ask and request and ask for your consideration that we strengthen both districts a little bit beyond where they are. And you do that by increasing the deviation number. And when you do that, you'll probably have to decrease some of the white population in the district. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thibodeau. Anyone else from the public? Thank you, sir.
My name is Carl Harding. I reside at 215 Prince Colony, Humboldt, Louisiana, 70364. I'd like to say good evening, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, all the rest of the members of the board, Superintendent Martin, and most importantly, the citizens of Terrebonne Parish. I'm here this evening to actually have some input on the subject of redistricting. Not only redistricting, but then the spin-offs that comes along with redistricting that will not only for this moment, but then for years to come. And as we look at it in theory, we have the understanding that we're operating on the principles, one man, one vote. This board, as it's constructed, it has been divided geographically under the concept of one man, one vote. We also are looking at, because of that, we are incorporating by law, which the understanding, which most oftentimes that's not being explained, is the fact that we have to understand equal representation by population. And we understand that the dynamics of this board, equal representation by population, one man, one vote, and the understanding that it has afforded the opportunity for this board to have 2 minority representatives upon this board that includes itself by understanding equal representation by population. Although it may look good on paper and it becomes more and more impractical because it does not look at just the one man, one vote, but it does not include parties and bipartisanship. It don't even include those people that were displaced by Hurricane Ida. Now, we have to understand that when we were discussing, I was in a discussion about redistricting, questions would come up and some things that understood, again, perhaps didn't have to be explained. But in the possibility of me taking a block of votes that represented less than, well, actually 48% of a minority. And the question was there, well, why would I actually consider taking a block of votes, Ms. Stacy, that would represent 40% minorities? And my feelings within my heart, and as I represent the people on the council, that if I do my job, regardless, that I will be re-elected. And this is not about a re-election. The topic here is redistricting. But then understanding the principles of bipartisanship and particular parties, there are some circumstances that are not incorporated at this time because of the census and the timing of the census and the circumstances because of Hurricane Ida. So, in actuality, in closing, I must simply put it this way. There has to be a better way.
Mr. Harlan, your time ran out. If anybody would like to make a motion.
Mr. President, I move we give.
Okay, motion by Mr. Hamlin, second by Ms. Benoit. Anyone in the audience would like to discuss that motion? Mr. Hamlin? Ms.
No.
Benoit? Any board member? That injection here, no so ordered. 3 minutes, sir.
Yes. Okay, so it's not so much that I'm disagreeing so much with the theory of this proposal. That has to be a better way. When you look at the percentages, I think District 1 and District 2 should be afforded a better opportunity than somewhat of a 50-50 chance of being elected. The consideration when you actually look at the proposal and you look at all the other circumstances, all the other districts has a better than a 60% chance of winning. I'm not asking you to really be so theoretical, but being pragmatic about this particular situation. Sometimes, to reach your objective is not because of theory, it's because of practicality. Therefore, I would say thank you, and may God bless you and yours.
Thank you, Mr. Harlan. Anyone from the public would like to speak? State your name and address, sir.
Hi, everybody. Craig Luke. I live at 103 Georgia Grove Drive. Home address, but it's in Grand Caillou back here. First of all, let me say this. I've been knowing Kevin since high school. We have a large fort, it's not everything. You guys are in good hands. I know he's done his best with all this. My biggest concern is my community specifically. And I certainly understand you guys are under some federal mandates and things like that. Your hands are tied in some areas on the process that you're going to have to go through to achieve the benchmarks or the goals, whatever that you're mandated to achieve. The only thing that concerns me is the representation of my community. And when I say my community, I'm speaking, when I say Grand Caillou, our community historically has always been from Ashland all the way to the end of 4 Point Road. We got 3 sections to our community. The lower end, the Dulac section, the central part's more like Grand Caillou, and then the northern end would be Ashland. And I'm pretty much resigned to the fact that it looks like whether the school board districts or even the parish council district, eventually, you guys are going to mirror each other. We're going to lose the Ashland North community. It looks like it's going to be no longer in council district 7 or school board district 7. I'm not as familiar with the school board district members, but the district that Mr. Lehart represents. My concern is it just seems as though our community is being split. And I think 2 of the other alternatives, whether it be number 2 or number 3, I was looking at these maps earlier today at the library down the bayou, and to get a little bit more, blow it up, so to speak, to get a little more clearer. But 2 or 3, a little bit lower from the Ashland North subdivision, that a section of Grand Kai is going to still be in Council District 7, and forgive me guys, I'm focusing more on Parish Council, I'm just more familiar with it, so if I reference that, it's no offense intended on my part. But it basically, 2 of the alternatives look like that my community is going to be split between three districts. Ashland North may be a district, a little bit more in the central part of the Grand Caillou area is going to be in one district, and the lower end, if you choose alternative 2 or 3, the lower end of Grand Caillou Dulac area is going to be in a 3rd district. So that's my only concern, and I'm speaking about the viability of someone from my community running for public office in the future.
Excuse me, sir, your 3 minutes are up. I'll entertain
Motion to extend.
Moved by Mr. Hamlin, second by Mr. DeHart. Anyone else would like to discuss that issue? Mr. Hamlin, Mr. DeHart, any board member or any objection? Here, none so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. I'm wrapping up. Not much more. But basically, what I'm getting at, the viability of a candidate from my community running for election and winning, getting elected, could be greatly decreased because people that are familiar with any candidate from my community, 2/3 of the district, or possibly 1/3 for sure, I can almost say, wouldn't even have the ability to vote for a candidate from the Grand Caillou Dulac area. That possibility exists. So that's my only concern. And look, let me just say this. I know you guys and ladies up here, y'all have a tough job to do, whether it's y'all or Parish Council, and I respect the office. Anything I say, believe me, it's nothing personal, intimidating and everything, and I just want to thank you all for listening to me and giving me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Any other comments from the public? Any more comments? Okay, at this particular time, I close the public hearing. Now we go into our regular school board meeting. Call to order. We have an invocation by Mr. DeHart. Before we have the invocation by Mr. DeHart, we have a moment of silence that Dr. Trahan is going to read off.
Please have a moment of silence for the following individuals that have recently passed away. Ramona C. Hemel, retired school board service technician. Kathy C. Warren, retired custodian. And Glenn T. Bajeron, retired supervisor of finance. Thank you.
Everybody please stand. Lord, be with us during this meeting. In dealing with the agenda at hand, may we treat each other's opinion with respect. May this meeting be for each of us an opportunity to be the servants to the people we represent. We humbly ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. DeHart. Ms. Bruner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Michael Lagarde.
Here.
Mr. Gregory Harding.
Here.
Mr. Matthew Ford.
Here.
Mrs. Debbie Benoit.
Here.
Mrs. Stacy Solé. Here. Mr. Clyde Hamner.
Here.
Mr. Roger Dale DeHart.
Here.
Dr. Maybelle Trahan.
Here.
And Mr. Dave Voisin. Here. Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Brunet. Item number 5, approval of minutes of special school board meeting on December 21st, 2021, regular school board meeting on January 4, 2022, special school board meeting on January 11, 2022, and special school board meeting on January 18, 2022. The recommendation that the board approve the minutes of special board meeting on December 21st, 2022, regular school board meeting on 2021, and January 4, 2022, special school board meeting on January 11, 2022, and special school board meeting on January 18, 2022, as recorded.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hamlin,
Second.
second by Dr. Trahan. Anyone else would like to discuss the recommendation? Mr. Hamlin,
No discussion.
Dr. Trahan.
No, sir.
Any board member? Are there any objection here? None so ordered. Item number 6, announcements. We had the public hearing meeting tonight. 2-1 2/28 African American History Month, 2/7/11 National School Counselor Week, 2/15/4/30 Executive Committee, 5 o'clock Building, Food, and Service Trustment Committee, Finance, Insurance, Section 16 Land Committee, Education, Technology, and Policy Committee. 2/28 3/1 Mardi Gras Holiday, 3/8 6 p.m. regular school board meeting, tenant pending board approval. Item number 7, committee meeting report. Item A, 7A will be executive committee. Dr. Tron.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Executive Committee was met at 4:30 p.m. on Tuesday, January 18th, in the school board room of the school board office with the following members present. Myself, Ms. Stacy Soley, ad hoc member. Mr. Harding was absent. In attendance was also Mr. Clyde Hamner, Phillips, Mr. Martin, and Ms. Michelle Klingman. The meeting was called to order with the invocation and the pledge. We examined and authorized payment of invoices for the current month. Any of the committee members have any questions? Mr. Lagarde? Any concerns? Mr. Harding?
No, ma'am.
The recommendation is that the executive committee examined and authorized payment of invoices for the current month, including payroll and travel expenses. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Second, thank you. Mr. Hamner, any comment?
No discussion.
Mr. Harding? Any comment, public? Any objections? So moved. There being no further business to come before the executive committee, the meeting was adjourned at 4:39 p.m. Mr. Harding, I return the meeting to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tron. Item 7B, Education, Technology, and Policy Committee. Ms. Debbie Benoit.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Education, Technology, and Policy Committee met on Tuesday, January 18th at 5 p.m. in the boardroom. Present were Mr. Ford, Vice Chair, Dr. May Beltrahan, and myself, who came late, I'll say. Also in attendance was Mr. Harding, Board President, Mr. Hamner, Mr. Roger Dale Dehart, and Mr. Michael Lagarde, Ms. Stacy Soleil, Mr. Dane Boisan, Superintendent Martin, and the staff. I don't see where the minutes show that I came to the meeting. It just says I was absent. So can we make that adjustment in there?
Ms. Benoit, we do have, Ms. Debbie Benoit entered the meeting during the foregoing.
It's at the end.
It's right after this, even though it's a long recommendation.
Oh, okay.
We do have you in.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
You will.
Okay, so the first recommendation is the committee recommends that the board approve as presented revised policy file D-7.4 purchasing.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hamner.
Second.
Second by Ms. Soleil. Any public comment? Mr. Hamner?
No comments.
Ms. Soleil? Any board members? Any objections? Hearing none, so moved. Recommendation number 2, the committee recommends that the board approve as presented revised policy file D-7.4A bids and quotations.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Trahan, second by Mr. Dehart. Any public comment? Dr. Trahan?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Dehart?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Any board members? Any objections? Hearing none, so moved. Recommendation number 3, the committee recommends, with the exception of myself, who abstained, that the board approve as presented revised policy file G-8.1 library materials sections.
Ms. Benoit,
Yes, sir. Mr. Hamner.
I'd like to make a motion to lay this item on the table.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Hamner to table this item, and I have a second by Dr. Trahan. Is there any public comment? And I will caution the public that the comments have to be contained to the tabling, not the item itself. Any public comment?
I don't know what tabling means in a situation like this, so.
Okay.
I can't ask the question, but I just need clarification on what that means in the future.
Okay. So the attorney can explain it to you.
The motion to table is to put it off to the next.
So we won't begin the next meeting.
No. Point of order.
Point of order. Yes, Mr. DeHart.
I'm not an attorney, and in all respect, if it's laid on the table, the only time it can be brought back up is if somebody from the dissenting side brings it back up. Am I right, Mr.?
That's correct.
I just want to add to that to where we're not confusing anybody.
Right.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So with the motion on the table, that means there's no comment or discussion by the board. We move to a vote.
Roll call vote.
So roll call vote, yes. So Ms. Ramona, do you need to make any more comment about that?
It's going to be that the board table the matter as it relates to revised policy file G-8.1, library materials selection.
Thank you. Okay.
So yes, tabling it, then we're going to hear it.
That's
Right.
right, basically, right. So a yes vote is to table, a no vote is to not.
All votes are in. 2 objections to the tabling are Mr. Ford and Mr. Lagarde.
All right. Next recommendation is number 4. The committee recommends that the board call for a public hearing on February 1st, 2022 at 6 p.m. At 201 Stadium Drive in Houma for consideration of adopting the attached resolution establishing and defining the Terrebonne Parish School Board 2021 election districts in accordance with the federal and state statutes. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hamner. Second by Mr. DeHart. Any public comment? Mr. Hamner?
No comment.
Mr. DeHart?
No comment.
Any board members? Any objections? Hearing none, so moved. Recommendation number 5, the committee, as amended, recommends that the board approve the archiving of the Terrebonne Parish School Board's live stream meetings for a period of 12 months on the Terrebonne Parish School District's website.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Trahan. Second by Ms. Soleil. Any public comment? Dr. Trahan?
I'm glad to see that it will be archived. We had begun doing the live stream, but you actually had to watch it during the time that the meeting was going on. You could, if you were at work or school or for whatever reason unable to be at your computer at that time, you missed it and were not able to watch it again. This would allow our public to go back to the website at their convenience, and they'll be able to watch it. And it'll be there for 12 months. So I'm real glad that this has come forth.
Thank you. Ms. Soleil? Any board members? Yes, Mr. Ford.
I'm pleased that this may potentially pass through the board. I did bring it up a year ago or so, and it was shot down, but couldn't even get it to committee. But I'm very pleased in that this will be up at least through the next election. So pretty much everyone up here is hoping to be reelected, and I really encourage every one of you out there on YouTube right now or Facebook Live, go back and watch these videos. Watch how your people voted. See where they really stand. Thank you.
Any other board members? Any objections? Hearing none, so moved. Mr. President, I conclude my report, so I turn the meeting back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Benoit. Before I go any further, I'd like to recognize tonight that we had 2 gentlemen that spoke, former council member for District 2, Mr. Wayne Thibodeau, and also council member Carl Harding for District 2. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. Item number 7C, Building, Food, Service, Transmission Committee, Mr. Dan Visor.
Thank you, President Harding. The Buildings, Food Service, Transportation Committee met immediately following the 5 p.m. Education Technology Policy Committee on Tuesday, January 18, 2022, in the boardroom of the School Board Office with the following members. Myself as Chair, Mr. D. Hart as Vice Chair, Mr. Harding on the committee as well as President. Also in attendance was Ms. Soleil, Dr. Trahan, Vice President, Mr. Hamner, Mr. Ford, Mr. Lagarde, Ms. Benoit, Superintendent Martin, and members of his staff. Recommendation number 1, the committee recommends that the board authorize the purchasing department to advertise for bids for a warehouse truck, funding to be derived from FEMA reimbursement funds.
So moved.
So moved, Mr. Harding.
Second.
Second, Ms. Soleil. Any public comments? Mr. Harding?
No, sir.
Ms. Soleil? Any other board members? Any objections? Hearing none, motion passes. There being no further business to come before the Buildings Food Service Committee, the meeting was adjourned at 6:23. I turn the meeting back over to you, President Harding.
Thank you, Mr. Visor. Item 7D, Finance, Insurance, and Section 16 Land Committee, Mr. Clyde Hamner.
The Finance, Insurance, and Section 16 Lands Committee met immediately following the 5 p.m. Education, Technology, and Policy Committee and the Buildings, Food Service, and Transportation Committee meetings on Tuesday, January 18th in the boardroom of the School Board Office with the following members present: myself, the Chairman, Mr. Mike Lagarde, Vice Chair, and Ms. Stacy Soleil, Committee Member. Also in attendance were Mr. Greg Harding, President, Dr. Maybelle Trahan, Vice President, Mr. Dane Voisin, Mr. Roger Dale Dehart, Ms. Debbie Benoit, Mr. Matt Ford, Superintendent Martin, and members of the staff. The meeting was called to order, and the first recommendation was the committee recommends that the board authorize the purchasing department to advertise for bids on duplicator paper and card stock.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Benoit, seconded by Mr. Voisin. Any members of the public wish to address the motion? Ms. Benoit?
No, sir.
Mr. Voisin? Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing none, the motion passes. Recommendation number 2, the committee recommends that the board authorize the purchasing department to advertise for bids on miscellaneous school supplies and equipment ruined by Hurricane Ida.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Soleil.
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Trahan. Any members of the public wish to address this item? Ms. Soleil?
No, sir.
Ms. Trahan?
No, sir.
Any other members of the board? Is there any objection to the motion? Hearing no objection, the motion passes. Recommendation number 3, the committee recommends that the board authorize the purchasing department to advertise for bids on Section 16 hunting and trapping leases that are currently available and/or may become available during the annual renewal period. Moved by Mr. Ford.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Soleil. Any members of the public wish to address this motion? Mr. Ford?
I did get a couple of phone calls about this, probably just because it's such an interesting topic, but I don't want to amend anything, but I would like to encourage whoever does win this bid, maybe let's get with some of our supervisors and partner up, and we might be able to turn this into a learning experience for our community, especially those younger students. So when they do harvest those eggs, and maybe they can come bring a few to the school and talk about what they did and how they harvested them, and maybe give a little historical perspective. So I'm not asking for it to be put in motion, but I want to encourage whoever does win that bid to do so.
Mr. Dehart?
I thought the recommendation was about hunting and trapping leases.
It is.
Okay. The eggs thing is a separate, different deal. And I'd like to request at a later date a copy of the availability, because I do get calls too for hunting and trapping leases. That way we can pass on information. I always refer them to Miss Alley, but I'd just like to get a copy of that. Thank you.
Yes. Come to the mic, because I am a little confused myself.
Yeah, this recommendation is only advertising, hunting and trapping. We're supposed to have a separate recommendation for holiday eggs. I think it might be
It's
Yeah,
missing.
it is. It is.
That's why I commented, because I thought it was, so.
Is it in here somewhere?
She said it's
Are-
missing.
So we're going to postpone a vote on that? Or do you want me to go back to,
You better check with the attorney and see
what
what
do
he
we do,
says.
Mr.?
I'd like to offer a motion to deviate to take it up.
It was supposed to be.
It was supposed to be, and the only thing you do is you can add it to the agenda. So you need
Yes.
to add that recommendation.
Or can we wait till,
You can wait till the next meeting, you can put it on, yes, you can put it.
But there's a timeline that we.
yeah, okay. So if you get me the motion, I'll add it to the agenda. But I need a copy of the motion.
If
Is it in our board book?
If you go to the minutes, it's in there.
It's in the minutes from last meeting.
You gotta finish this recommendation. that y'all-
Yes.
You know, and then
Right.
at the end of it,
Yes.
after you do the next one, the fourth one, I would then, have someone do a motion to add it to this.
Okay. So we have a recommendation on the table that the board authorize the purchasing department to advertise for bids on Section 16 hunting and trapping leases that are currently available and/or may become available during the annual renewal period. We have a motion by Mr. Ford
And
and
I'll second
Mr. Seconded by Mr. Dehart. Did we have public comment
It
yet?
was Ms. Soley.
Ms. Soleil did? Okay, I'm sorry. Do we have public comment yet?
Public, you did, Ford and Solway, and then you did commented it. and
Okay.
Ford, so
And save your comment because we're going to need it again.
Yes.
Any objection to this motion by the board? Hearing none, this motion passes.
Mr. Hamner, would you allow me to speak? I'd like to offer a motion to deviate, to take up the matter about the alligator eggs.
Please
that
do,
was
Mr. Dehart.
Omitted in error.
Please do.
It was taken up in committee, and it,
to add that recommendation.
yeah, I'd like to add that recommendation to,
Second.
to this. And I know we need a unanimous vote to consider a deviation.
We have a motion to add an agenda item that was left off.
I was just going to say, he said the next one is in number 4. This should be number 5.
Right. What I'm trying to do is find the motion.
Oh.
Nowhere in here. Does anybody have a copy of the motion? Because I don't.
I can recite the motion for you.
Oh, good.
The board authorized that the purchasing department authorized to advertise and for the collection and lease for alligator eggs.
That's exactly
It's
what
not
it says.
complicated.
We're adding that to the agenda. Is there any objection to add that to the agenda? Hearing none, item 5 is being added to the agenda.
Yes.
Okay. Recommendation number 4.
Do you want to repeat the science lesson we went over with Mr. Ford was talking
No, I'm
about?
going to let him do it in a minute.
We'll omit that for now.
And,
But that is a good idea.
recommendation number 4, the committee recommends that the board adopt the following original budget for the Building Fund, Capital Projects Fund, Workers' Compensation Fund, Loss Fund, and Group Insurance Claims Fund for the 21-22 fiscal year. Moved by Mr. Voisin,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Soleil. Any members of the public wish to address the item, any of these budget items? Mr. Voisin? Ms. Soleil? Any member of the board? Hearing no objection, the motion passes. Agenda item 5, recommendation to open bids for the harvesting of alligator eggs on Section 16 lands. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Moved by Mr. Ford,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Dehart. Any members of the public wish to address the motion on harvesting alligator eggs from Section 16 lands? Mr. Ford?
Yes. So as I mentioned previously, I don't want to change the agenda item or the motion. It's good the way it is, but I'd like to encourage whoever does win the bid that they potentially get in touch with Mr. Ogeron or one of the supervisors to potentially turn this into a learning experience, not just for the alligators and the eggs and the harvesting thereof, but also it opens up an opportunity to talk about Section 16 lands and how those were donated by the federal government in the 1890s, I believe, as a resource for school systems to build collateral and have some equity in there, so for building and growth purposes. So I think this is a great idea to, just encourage them, and maybe someone can bring it up to them when they do win that bid. Thank you.
Any other members of the board? Any objection to the motion? The motion passes. Let me make sure. Mr. President, I turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamlin. Item number 8, superintendent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. President. First agenda item is matter pertaining to the acceptance of RFP for general contractor for the temporary campuses at South Terrebonne and Eleanor High School. The recommendation, there are two. The first one is that the board accept the lowest bid received, meeting all specifications for general contractor services for site preparation for the temporary campuses at South Terrebonne High School in the amount of $3,696,000 from Thompson Construction Company, 100 St. Peter Road, Thibodaux, Louisiana, 70301, funding to be derived from FEMA reimbursement funds.
Moved by Mr. Faizan.
Second.
By Dr. Trahan. Anyone else would like to discuss that recommendation? Mr. Faizan. Dr. Trahan.
I'm just so pleased that we're finally getting something moving, and we're getting to a point where we're going to be able to bring our kids home soon.
Any board member? Are there any objections? Hearing none, so ordered.
Next recommendation, that the board accept the lowest bid received, meeting all specifications for general contractor services for site preparation for temporary campus at Eleanor Moore High School in the amount of $4,027,500 from Thompson Construction Company, 100 St. Peter Road, Thibodaux, Louisiana, 70301, funding to be derived from FEMA reimbursement funds.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Hamlin. Second by who? Oh, Mr. DeHart? Okay. Anyone else would like to discuss the recommendation? Mr. Hamlin? Mr. DeHart?
No, sir.
Any board member? Oh, Doc?
I got my kids to go to Ellender too. I want to make sure that they know I'm thinking of them and them coming home as well.
Okay. Any other comments? Are there any objections? Hearing none, so ordered.
Next is a recommendation that the board approve a family and medical leave in accordance with policy file F11.48 for Brenda Verrett, bus attendant in the Transportation Department beginning January 6th, 2022 through April 4th, 2022 for medical.
Moved by Mr. DeHart.
Second.
Second by Dr. Trahan. Anyone else would like to discuss the recommendation? Mr. DeHart.
No, sir.
Dr. Trahan.
No, sir.
Any board member? If there any objection, hearing none, so ordered.
The next recommendation, the board approve a family and medical leave in accordance with policy file F11.4A for Amy Dedivo, school bus operator in the Transportation Department beginning January 25th, 2022 through April 26th, 2022 for medical.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Benoit.
Second.
Second by Mr. DeHart. Anyone else would like to discuss the recommendation? Ms. Benoit.
No, sir.
Mr. DeHart.
No, sir.
Any board member? Are there objections? Hearing none, so ordered.
Board members, you have been provided personnel actions for the period of December 13th, 2021 through January 21st for your review and perusal. The next agenda item will be a request for an executive session, and it relates to the matter bearing upon litigation between Teddy Billiot, Mary Verdant, Lisa Nakan, Tasha Dardar, Jade Billiot, Lanny Dardar, Candace Henderson, Kelly Nakan, Loretta Verdant, Casey Dardar, Shanna Ray Dardar, and Joan Brunet versus the Terrebonne Parish School Board, the Terrebonne Parish School District, Philip Martin, individually and in his capacity as superintendent, Gregory Horgan, individually in his capacity as the president of the Terrebonne Parish School Board, docket number 2:21 CV 01144, United States District Court, Eastern District of Louisiana Civil Action. Again, request executive session.
So moved.
I think we have to make a motion for executive session.
Moved by Mr. DeHart,
Second.
second by Mr. Hamner. Anyone else would like to just discuss that motion? Mr. DeHart,
No, sir.
Mr. Hamner,
No, sir.
any board member? Mr. Ford?
We're on live right now. Do we need to
Yes,
pause that?
yes, we do.
Okay, just making sure.
Okay, any